Eli, welcome to the show.
Hey, Tom, great to be here.
Now, we're going to kick this off with a confession because I'm not sure if you're aware, but maybe 2 years ago, you guys had a cover picture on your company LinkedIn page, on the Mattermade LinkedIn page.
Okay.
And I somehow came across it and I was like, wow, this has got to be the best cover image ever. It was something along the lines of, you changed it now, I checked today, something along the lines of the secret team behind the growth of, and then showed logos of the different clients, like massive
Yeah.
names like Loom, etc.
Yeah.
First question, was that your brainchild, that cover image, or someone else on the team?
I mean, I can't take credit for the actual design of the thing, but yeah, I like sent a Slack message to someone I'm sure on our design team. It was like, hey, we've social proof. Let's do this.
It's so powerful. If you go to the Fame company page today, you'll see a version of that which I adapted from yours. So thank you, Eli.
Amazing, man. I love that.
So I want to get into the journey specifically because you came from the almost like startup world, and now we've built these two, I believe, bootstrap, like solo founded agencies. And so that's the stuff I love. But my first question is, why did we make that shift? Because we did the whole like, I believe you raised money, sold the company, and I love it. It was a super boring niche. So let's just get into that and then understand why you decided to kind of move into the real world afterwards.
That's the real world. I love it. Yeah, I mean, the shift for me, I think it's interesting because I came up in this world of like Silicon Valley mindset, right? I started my first software company when I was 21, and it was all like all the kind of both positive and negative things that you hear about Silicon Valley culture is like hustle mode and all these things where I was just like grinding 80, 100-hour weeks and felt great about it. Like I loved what I was doing. But if you can imagine like how impressionable we are and how much the type of work and the ways that we work kind of shape us during those early years from early 20s through late 20s, call it, that was the mold that I was used to. So when I was, let's see, I was about 29, I think 28, 29 was when I shifted. That was 2019. Um, I shifted to services, and the shift was very purposeful. I kind of took a step back and was like, I've been chasing shiny. I've been chasing like I want to start a company that goes public someday. I want to have to take an elevator to visit different floors of all the different employees that I have. Like it was just this kind of egoic thing that I had been chasing for so long. And once I realized that I wanted to actually just live like a really good life and have a great lifestyle and like spend time with the people that I love and care about and have interesting hobbies, suddenly I was like, wait, I'm not optimizing towards that. So that was the shift to services was having that realization.
Was there a catalyst for that realization? Or you just woke up one day?
I think I'd been so after the company, the software company was acquired in 2014. And afterwards, I had no clue what I wanted to do with my life. And so I ended up acquiring an e-commerce company that was failing. And I wanted to just like take a break from tech, learn something new. I spent 4 years turning that business around and then ultimately sold it to private equity in 2019. And so the 2019 kind of that moment was taking a step back and saying, like, that was a crazy experience. I've had two crazy experiences now, right? I've had a software crazy experience, I've had an e-commerce crazy experience. So I think it was a natural point to take a step back and say, like, what should my next crazy experience be?
Okay, and this brings us to Mastermade, where
Yes.
I understand we were doing performance marketing for Silicon Valley startups.
Yep. So Mattermade, I guess before we even get there, I called it the tricycle life. So I created this ideal thing that I wanted to chase, the new version of like going public or whatever, and it was replaced with the idea of the tricycle life. So I knew I wanted to have kids. I knew I wanted to orient towards family, and so in my mind, the tricycle life was like, let me build a services company. It's so funny, like the original, when I think about what it was originally in my mind and what it's become, very different things. But originally, I was like, it would be sweet if I could just advise a small portfolio of like 15 companies on marketing, have them pay me like 2,500 bucks a month and make, 40 grand a month or something like that. 40 grand was like the target per month. And I'm not sure if that math's out, but whatever. And so that's what I started it as. It was like, I'm gonna just be your like marketing guru guy, and very quickly realized that a couple things. One, I don't like actually doing the work. I like hiring people that are smarter than me to do better work than I would ever do. Two, clients who only have the budget for $2,500 a month are needing a lot more than just marketing help, but they're looking to marketing to solve all those problems. So that was kind of its own little problem space. And then three was managing that many clients as an individual is just an absolute nightmare. It wasn't relaxing at all. So within the first 3 months of that business, I quickly pivoted into, okay, I'm going to hire someone who's super talented and set them up for success. And so it shifted from solo consultancy Eli to agency pretty quickly.
I think I also used to have that vision of being like the external relaxed consultant that has like 10 clients, gets paid loads, but then what you realize is that all the problems of those clients within the marketing function kind of become your problems, and then you have problems from 10 different companies. And then you also
Oh
have the
yeah,
problem of your own company. So that I totally resonate with that realization. And so that's when you were like, okay, I'm gonna actually build a services business around, well, you probably have the initial knowledge, but then you're gonna hire people that are better and nurture and train them.
exactly. Yeah, and it's evolved a ton. I mean, we that agency grew pretty quickly. Like we went from 0 to 4.2 million a year in EBITDA in around 3 years. Um, and what we did during those years kind of evolved. It was originally like marketing org in a box. And then we were like, that sucks. Like it's hard to be amazing at all different categories of marketing. And so where we've landed now with Mattermade is we are the best, or we think we're the best at driving efficiency through paid programs. So we're out there slugging it out with all the other paid media agencies, but we have an amazing track record to kind of back our claim.
And you were the solo founder, well, are the solo founder, and it's bootstrapped, right?
Yep, 100%.
So what were you doing with all that cash? Because I can't imagine much of it needed to be reinvested into the company.
I mean, that's the nice thing about services businesses that I'm sure you can relate is like, yeah, you're not needing to keep investing into R&D or these things that, software or product companies have to do. Yeah, that cash was getting invested. So I if you look at my LinkedIn, 2021 was a very busy year for me on the investment front. I LP'd into or became an LP in like 6 or 7 VC funds, um, and just upped my exposure to kind of that side of the world, which I hadn't previously had access to. So I think that capital just really opened a bunch of doors for me to get more invested in different kind of interesting categories.
Why
Not
did
part of a
you?
pistachio farm.
Okay, well, let's get into this. So, first question is why did you choose the VC fund asset class?
Oh, man, that question I was asking myself a million times a day in 2022 and 2023 after, putting 7 figures into VC and then having the entire industry like absolutely crumble and then having my business for a period of time also crumble because all of our clients were tech. So yeah, that's I think I have a different ethos on it now. Part of it is like, they say invest in what you know, right? And I know VC backed tech. And so I think in part, like my connections and access there gives me some kind of an edge. But at the same time, it's also a bit silly because I'm over indexed in my exposure to tech now, right? It's like my clients are tech, both my agencies, like, and now my investments. So I think my kind of thesis there has shifted to be much more diversified now, having seen a bad market cycle through. Uh, yeah,
Makes sense because the way I like to think about it, if you have like the P&L side of your life, which is these agencies creating cash, and then you have like the balance sheet side of your life, which is where you invest the money.
yeah.
And you're totally right. Like your whole, like both sides were focused on like West Coast tech, which maybe explains why we diversified into the pistachio farm.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, the pistachio farm is kind of this hilarious thing where um, our financial advisor who brings us all like alternative deals, um, he was like, yeah, so there's this basically, if you invest in farms, you get a portion of their farming tax credit. And there's like all sorts of crazy farming tax benefits um, around like the equipment and the land and all of these things. And so his part of his strategy for our portfolio was let's start buying into this pistachio farming outfit. And it started off as like a fairly small investment, and then it kind of grew, and now it's like a pretty meaningful chunk of this thing. And so I joke with my wife that we need to start wearing like pistachio swag, you know, like pistachio hats, and just like anytime I see someone eating peanuts, I like slap them out of their hand. I'm like, dude, it's got to switch you to pistachios. So yeah,
And that, I presumably that investment is giving you cash flow.
yes, yeah.
Nice. Is there anything else in there that's different or exciting? So we've got the VC funds, we've got the pistachio farm.
Not different and exciting. I think the rest of it is like the usual suspects, opportunity zones, real estate. Um, I think it's hard to top the pistachio farm.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. But then also presumably to start No Boring Design, which is the second service company,
Yep.
you took a chunk of cash, but maybe not millions, but hundreds of thousands around.
I wouldn't even say that honestly. Like I think that's the beauty of services is it doesn't take much as you know to get these things off the ground. And so for me, the genesis story for No Boring Design is an interesting one where so 2022 came around, right? 2021 we were flying high, super profitable. 2022 was when the VC market collapsed or began to collapse. And like all of our clients were tech. And so that completely shook our business. And um, we had two really talented designers on our team, a creative director and a senior designer. And I basically didn't have any work for them. And so they were on payroll. And I was like, well, shit, I don't want to let these people go. What could I do creatively to keep them around? And so we had invested pretty heavily into our own brand through these designers and always got compliments on it. People like, who did your brand? Who did your website at Mattermade? And like, do you take design projects on? And I'd always say, no, no, no. So I was like, you know what? What if I spun these guys out under their own brand and just see if there's appetite for that in the market right now, under the hypothesis that a bunch of these tech companies just fired their in-house designer, and within the next couple of months they're going to realize, well, you can't market and it's hard to sell if you don't have assets that are beautiful and designed. So yeah, I approached our creative director on like I think it was a Friday, and I was like, hey man, I have this idea. If you're down for it, I want you to come up with a brand identity and a website over the weekend. Let's launch it on Monday and let's see if we can make something happen here. And I think I was pretty like transparent about why and stuff. And so yeah, he came up with this fun brand identity for what became No Boring Design. I bought the domain name. I couldn't come up with a clever name, so I just came up with a very literal name. And it turns out it's really fun because you get like to play around with the NBD, kind of no big deal, no boring design, no bad days, whatever. Um, and so yeah, noboringdesign.com got launched, and within a couple of months, we had our first clients. We were breaking even on the design talent. So back to your original question of like how much cash had to be invested, I maybe ate payroll on those two folks for 3 months, something like that. So under $100,000 invested to get it off the ground.
And was there or is there cross-selling opportunities between the two?
Yeah, it's actually that's like one of my cheat codes is so we at Mattermade, the performance marketing agency, we fundamentally believe that in order to kind of plant our flag in the ground and drive the results that we claim that we can drive, we need to have as much control over the process end to end as possible. And creative is one of those things that a lot of people actually just posted about this today. I feel like to many people, creative is a nice to have, not a need to have. But then they come to us and they're like, hey, we need to spend $250,000 this month on paid. And I'm like, if you're not obsessing over experimenting with your creative when you're spending $250,000 a month, $250,000 a month on ads, like there's a screw loose, right? And so um, we actually require all of our Mattermade clients to sign up for a No Boring Design account where they get like 25 hours of design help without having to manage an in-house team member. And that allows us to have complete control over, the results that we're producing.
So when you say require, as in Mattermade would stop working with them if they didn't have that design resource.
Yeah, it's in their contract.
Wow, this is a secret sauce for sure. Because and am I right in saying that you were doing that work in house at Mattermade before,
Yes. Yeah. Same
and but
team.
you were charging more for it?
Yeah. So when it was, yeah, our prices back in the day were much higher. We were
Got it.
like, my sales pitch used to be like, hey, you're going to talk to our competitors. Our nearest competitor charges $10,000 a month less than we do. And I did that on purpose because it would attract a certain type of customer. And back in the day when cash was flowing freely, like it was fun because people would say yes to that and they'd want to work with us because they wanted to work with the best. And then it ended up biting us in the ass afterwards because then when the market turned, everybody's like, well, we shouldn't even approach Mattermade. We can't afford them. And so it took a lot of effort to retrain the market and say, no, 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 we're with the times. Like pricing has changed, and now people can. I think our entry price is 10K a month over at Mattermade. It used to be 45K a month.
Got it. But I bet in the early days anyway, that helped you with the margins. And maybe you wouldn't have made the 4.2 in the first 3 or so years without that pricing.
100%. Yeah, that pricing was absolutely critical, and that pricing allowed me to hire extremely senior talent, which I think was a core part of our offering and kind of what made us different was we had all of these extremely senior people who had spent a ton of time in house. So it helped us deliver on the actual promise.
What's your time split at the moment between the two? And then also spending more time investing in personal brand as well at the moment.
Yeah. Um, so I spend less than an hour a week on Mattermade. Mattermade's in a spot now where, we've gone up and down on the roller coaster. We're going back up now. The processes are all pretty well like established. The team is pretty well established. So a lot of the kind of fires that normally crop up with the services business, we've just got pretty well locked down, and the team over there is really fantastic.
What do
So
you
yeah,
do
it's
in
about
that hour?
that hour is spent in sales, and then a small portion of that is in my one-on-ones with the leader of that group.
Got it. And the title of the person, are they like a GM or CEO?
GM, yeah, he's our head of paid media is his title.
He's essentially running the company.
He's running the delivery. Yeah. So he doesn't touch sales. He jumps in and will assist with sales, but he's very much not wired to handle that side of the business and doesn't particularly care for it or like it. So I kind of like, all right, I know what his zone of genius is. I'll keep him there. He's fantastic with clients. He always like under promises and over delivers type of a guy. Um, and so keeping him in that lane, and then I just own the sales and like finance and all the kind of other stuff, but it's pretty lightweight at the end of the day.
But there's someone else in sales, presumably, because you can't be doing all the selling in less than 1 hour a week, right? Or can you?
Yeah, so that business is pretty low volume. Like I'm only fielding 4 calls a month because we pre-screen, right? So it's like I'm only going to hop on a call with someone if they are a legit business that has budget, that's like actively evaluating vendors and want to make a decision in the next couple of weeks. And so that weeds out, 80% of the inbound volume that's just kind of kicking tires, or maybe they're too early. So we have a good system for filtering. And then that means that I can just jump on those 4 calls a month and make them productive.
And so we've got 1 hour a week on Mattermade. Or what about the other two things?
Yeah, so No Boring Design is definitely my little startup baby right now. It like unlike Mattermade where everything is pretty chill and on rails, No Boring Design is like completely uncharted territory, right? So fires all the time and like new SOPs that need to be developed that we hadn't thought through previously. And then of course like that business is growing quickly enough that the processes that we set up, 3 months ago might not work this month, kind of a thing, which I'm sure you can relate to. Um, so that business gets, I don't know the exact hours, but I would say I'd spend between the two companies, 90% of my time is No Boring Design, 10% Mattermade. But then I made a pretty big shift recently, which you've observed in some funny ways online, where I basically was like, you know what? I think that instead of marketing directly, like being the marketer for No Boring Design and being the marketer for Mattermade and like creating campaigns and initiatives to spread awareness about those companies, I have a feeling that if I just focused on my own brand as an entrepreneur and just like developed an audience, that it will ultimately drive more demand to both of those companies, and it'll be way more fun. Because at the end of the day, like I'm not, and this is kind of what I struggled with. I've always had imposter syndrome, and I always knew I needed to be building an audience, but I was like, man, I'm not a marketer. Like I'm not. So for me to go on LinkedIn and be like the marketing guy just felt super disingenuous, and it was always like pulling teeth. And the same thing goes for design. Like I've got a great eye for design. I went to art school, but I'm not a designer. So if I were to talk about design, that would also be disingenuous. And so it took a long time for me to finally see like my skill is starting small businesses, making them super profitable, delivering great work for our clients. Like that's my skill as an entrepreneurship. And so that's what I should be talking about. So yeah, that we made that shift about a month ago. So most of my time now is spent on that.
Nice, yeah. And we'll obviously link to your LinkedIn profile below. I would urge anyone listening to go and check out your about section. Sort of epic. You talk specifically about a time when you guys were losing 200K a month.
Yeah.
Was this in the 2021 period, presumably with Mattermade?
This was 2022,
Yeah,
right when the market, yeah.
for sure. And because yeah, the market like spiked up and then everyone started cutting costs. And as you mentioned, like because you were slightly higher priced, maybe they were just like cutting you down. Um, are you happy to share a little bit more about that time, like the stress and how you guys came out of that?
Yeah, of course. I feel like that's something that as entrepreneurs, you don't see as much of that, like people sharing openly about the really hard times. So I think it's important. Yeah, so 2022 came around. Our client base, as you mentioned, like everybody basically was retreating. Their VCs were saying, hey, cut your agency ties, cut your marketing team by 80%, was pretty common, or 100%. I mean, a lot of them were just like firing most of their company. And so the agency was like the first to go, especially a marketing agency. It's like the canary in the coal mine. If you want to see where an industry is going, uh, go and look and see how their marketing spend is, like what if they're investing or pulling out. I think that's always like a leading indicator. Anyway, I digress. Um, so back to the losing 200K a month thing. Our clients all pulled back, and I was basically left with this like really shitty spot where we had this amazing team that we had spent a crazy amount of money to recruit. Like I'm pretty sure I went back and looked to see how much we spent on recruiting, and it was around $1 million in 2021. It's like an absurd amount of money spent to fight, because we were fighting with software. We were fighting with our clients, essentially VC-backed tech companies who had crazy budgets, and we were fighting to get the talent that they wanted for us, right? Or even better. Um, so it was like the headspace was like we're crushing it. We've been just doing so well. Surely this is a blip on the radar. Surely this is going to turn around. Like let's have long-term thinking and hold on to this team, both because we want to be a stable employer, and also because like we worked so hard. Surely within the next 3 months it's going to turn around. And so that was my one of my first mistakes, was being delusional about what was going to happen in the market, and being like my plan was hope at that point, and hope isn't a good plan. So yeah, we started, because of our payroll costs were super duper high. Like I said, very quality talent. I was personally losing $200,000 a month to carry that team for a while, a lot longer than I should have. Um, and it's one of these things too. I mean, obviously you talk a lot about employer relationship. And so I'd be very curious to get your take on this topic in particular. Um, my take is that at a very high level, when you look at it, it's like, oh, yeah, like an employer should provide a stable environment and they shouldn't be so super reactive to the market. And if maybe you overhired and now you're left carrying the bag, and then you shouldn't put that on your employees essentially. But I think the truth of the matter, or the reality that I've observed, is that when you're going through times like that, it's shitty for everyone. The employees are stressed out. They see like they just everything's crumbling around them. Everybody's stressed out. And so I believe, and maybe this is just a coping mechanism to deal with hard things, but I believe that it's actually better to call a spade and to let them go find an environment that's going to be less crazy and hectic and like stressful, than trying to keep them like strapped to your, crazy town show for the period of time that it's going to be a crazy town show. And yeah, and I think it's true. Like I look at where all of the people who were on the team went, and they're crushing it. They all went and leveled up. And that was my pitch to them originally. I was like, look, I think a lot of employers think of this as, we're going to try to keep you retained for as long as possible, and like, whatever. And my take is like, hey, you're going to come in here. We're just like a little stop on your journey. And my goal is to like accelerate your journey in any way I can. And like, I want you to look back on this period of time and be proud of the work that you did. And so like, I think that played out ultimately when I see where people landed and what they're doing today. I'm proud of that.
Yeah, you're the second point you made about being completely open and transparent that not everyone that joins your company is going to be there forever. And anything the company can do to help them on their journey is going to be great for the company because the team member will be more engaged and will probably do better work. But it's obviously also better for the team member because they're going to progress to where they ultimately want to be. That I think that's almost the secret to management, um, which we also try to live out at Fame. Switching gears slightly, I'd love to know how you think about the potential sale of these cash flowing agencies you have, because obviously you have the capital in the asset and it's paying you the margin, um, but then if somebody offered you a crazy multiple on that margin, then maybe you would sell it. Is that how you think about it, or is there other considerations?
Yeah. So it's a hard one. This is one that like I do spend time thinking about pretty regularly because I go back and forth. It's the funny thing for me at least is that, when you're doing well and the businesses are cash flowing, you kind of look at someone making these offers and you're like, well, okay, you're going to pay me some multiple on this EBITDA, but like I'm not actually stressing out to make this EBITDA happen. So it's like, why not just keep cash flowing it and treat it as like an asset or an annuity, and like build out a broader portfolio. Flip side of that is I also very clearly remember what it felt like to be the CEO of this company in 2022 and 2023. And it was some of the hardest time of my life, in part because it was incredibly financially stressful. Um, and so I think that there's some like, not to be overly like businessy about it, but I feel like I have a fiduciary responsibility to myself to protect and not allow myself to get back into that place of like crippling fear, where I'm like going outside and crying at the sun multiple times a day. Just like, it was a bad time. So yeah, it's like a non-answer to your question because I don't have it. I'm pretty undecided about it.
Yeah, yeah. It's like every month or every week, the multiple that you would accept could change to being like reasonable market level to like you would never sell, that makes total sense. Um, Final question. You mentioned zone of genius for the head of paid media in Matamade. What would you say your zone of genius is?
I think my zone of genius has something to do with identifying problem spaces and then finding people who are more talented than I am to solve those problem spaces or to slot into those problem spaces. I think that's the part of building that I really enjoy. It's like you're playing Jenga or like musical chairs and you're trying to get the right butts into the right seats. And when it clicks and that team starts to gel and you just get to see like the output shift, it's like a special feeling. So I think that's probably my zone of genius.
So we may not be surprised at some point in the future if we have service business number three sprout up.
This is true. Yeah, totally.
And in
Yeah,
an ideal world, it'd be something that Matamid and No Boring Design customers would have to have, e.g., it would be in the contract.
exactly. That should be like my filter criteria. No, honestly, one of the things I haven't done yet that it's like an uncharted territory that I'm really curious about is inorganic growth. Like I've acquired one company, the e-commerce company way back in the day, but I haven't ever done the like, I have two platforms now. I have a design platform and I have a paid media platform. Why not, go and find smaller teams that are doing great work, acquire them, roll them into our teams and grow that way? I think could be really, really interesting. But yeah, so we'll see. That could be the next thing you see me doing.
Oh, Eli, what a journey. And thanks for being so open with it. And I'm sure you're going to be more open with this content you're going to be creating, right? So
Yeah.
we'll obviously link to Madam Aid and No Boring Design. We'll link to your LinkedIn. Anything else we should mention or link to?
I just started a YouTube channel, so I'm sharing like some pretty honest deep dives on the entrepreneurial journey. I'm also building this new agency, No Boring Design, in the open. So I share like all of our numbers on there every week. So yeah, if people want to deep dive on or nerd out with me on growing businesses, that's where I'm doing it.
Amazing. That will all be linked below. Eli, thank you so much for coming on.
Tom, thanks for having me. This is fun.